Hi, and welcome to another American history video. We're continuing this one by talking about the Great Depression and two presidents' response to the Great Depression, kind of an overview of FDR's New Deal. Before FDR was president, we had Herbert Hoover, who gets a bad rap. We're going to be Herbert Hoover fans in this YouTube channel. We now stand for Hoover as Food Administration leader in World War I and cabinet member throughout the 1920s. Hoover was a great manager and humanitarian. It made sense that he would become president after the Roaring '20s, and the fact that his presidency is defined by the Depression beginning due to no fault of his own and reactions which kind of tied to an old way of thinking and not a revolutionary way of thinking that was needed. Hoover becomes synonymous with all these bad things that happen, but it wasn't his fault. This is a Hoover stand video, so we're going to give him a little more credit. Anyway, Hoover's philosophy was that of rugged individualism. He did not believe that the government should be intertwining itself into the lives of the workers or the people, but the business, yes. He was a supply side economics guy. More on that in the next video. Either way, as Secretary of Commerce under Calvin Coolidge and throughout the Roaring '20s, he supported big businesses and the production, which helps. I guess it is a little bit his fault that he caused the depression, isn't it? No, I blame the consumers. Anyway, he helps produce this supply side boom, and a lot of people buying a lot of things, and the general deflationary practices. Now, obviously, that's demand is going to shrink a lot in the cyclical effect. But his philosophy and what created the boom, being supply side, is going to help make more production when there's a demand issue, and that makes part of the depression worse. Okay. And also his rugged individualist philosophy that the individual is responsible for success and that government intervention hurts liberty is going to limit his response. Now, that's not to say he does nothing. He does several things, okay? Notably, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which is going to be a part of that supply side response to the Depression, giving a lot of loans to a lot of businesses, as well as limited public works, specifically the Hoover Dam. So you end up with a very small response to a very big problem. By the time FDR takes over as president in 1933, there's 25% unemployment. The dam isn't going to do enough. The Reconstruction Finance is being too stringy with its loans. You have to inject money into this economy, and Hoover is reluctant to do that. And so you end up getting large urban slums full of poor people with Hoovervilles. You get a bonus army of World War I veterans marching to Washington, D.C., and Hoover ends up locked in the White House, and he sends the military to violently suppress the bonus army. And then you go in with the military to get rid of the Hoovervilles, right? Like the response to desperation is force, and that looks bad, and everything is bad, and we're going to blame the president. So FDR pretty much just walks away with this election. Being not Herbert Hoover was basically all you needed to be to win the 1932 presidential election. But FDR does this on a promise. And that promise is a new deal for the American people. So we call his plan the New Deal. What is the New Deal? What philosophy defines the New Deal? FDR doesn't know. FDR's speech is, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And this just means that we don't need to be afraid of government action like Hoover was. Okay, so FDR is going to have very little cohesive plan. And that means that some of the programs contradict one another, some of the programs fail, but some are very successful. Now, the success of the New Deal is not in ending the Great Depression. The success of the New Deal is in weathering the storm of the Depression. In Europe, fascism is taking hold. In Asia, communism is taking hold. But in America, capitalistic democracies, they remain. We have more regulation, but it's still capitalism. It's still a democracy, and that's thanks to FDR's New Deal. So the result of the New Deal is making people feel secure in the economy and not overthrowing our government and our whole system. And it is weathering that storm with confidence. Now, there is an argument to be made that the New Deal only made the Depression longer. Quite frankly, though, maybe economically that could be true, but in terms of a human psychological result and the spirit of America, to say that the New Deal made things worse is probably false. So the lasting effects of the New Deal is that it gives us what we call the social safety net. We have unemployment programs, social security programs, government assistance programs, government housing programs, which are problematic, and we'll talk more about that in the 1950s. But Social Security, we have government programs to catch people if they fall on hard times. This isn't enough to end a depression, but it is enough to give people a sense of security and stability, right? One of the major things he's going to do is insure the banks through the FDIC. This creates confidence in the banking system, which was lacking as a result of the bank crisis and the cause of depression. So this causes people to put their money back into banks and allows us to have more normal economic flow of money. This is the legacy of the New Deal, right? Not in saving the banks, but in saving the way people look at the banks. Okay, so another major effect of the New Deal is Keynesian economic theory, which is what the next video is on. But basically, as a result of FDR and the New Deal, we have a new way of responding to recession in the United States, and we have preserved our capitalist democracy. In the short term, he creates a political coalition called the New Deal Coalition, which is able to unite, big business, labor, minorities, farmers, urban, rural, under this big collection of voters. And then that creates, kind of a modern day liberalism. Okay. The New Deal itself features three major types of programs: recovery, relief, and reform. The FDR didn't set out to have like three major parts of programs. These are ways that historians define different sets of many, many programs. Recovery programs are more short-term. We're trying to solve the immediate problem of the depression, increase production, and economic output. Relief programs are direct payments to the people from the government. And then reform programs are, how do we avoid this happening again? So a program like the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This is a way to recover stability in the banks, but this is also a way to prevent a future bank crisis by making sure there are less runs on the banks because people know their money is backed up by the federal government. He starts massive public works programs. These are a way to recover unemployment, okay? And then things like the Social Security Act are ways to give relief directly to the people. So we do a lot of reform, specifically the Glass-Steagall Act, which creates the SEC, and we have a separate commercial and investment banking and more government regulation of banks. In general, and in your readings, are several of these programs, and classifying them as recovery, relief, reform can kind of show you what nuts and bolts wise the New Deal was trying to do. But again, the major effect of it isn't in its recovery, relief, or reform. It is in its surviving American spirit and changing the relationship between citizens and government and how we define liberty. Okay, so in general, the big idea here behind the New Deal, again, contrasting with Hoover's do nothing approach, nothing, okay? Contrasting with Hoover's do only a damn thing approach. We have his do anything and everything approach, which helps the Americans weather the storm, preserves the American capitalistic system and American democracy, though it doesn't end the Great Depression. How the Great Depression ends in the next video.